Marry me with my money.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Console Comparisons, and today we're looking at an all-time favorite arcade port that I absolutely love, and that's Sunset Riders. Now when this game came out in the early 90s, I was obsessed with it. No matter where I went, it was an arcade shop, truck stop, just any place that had this game, you couldn't pull me away from it. And then when I found out that it got ported to the SNES and Sega Genesis, I went nuts. Unfortunately, I only bought one copy, and that was the Super Nintendo version. And not too long ago, I thought that the Sega Genesis one was exactly the same until I actually played it. And I have a lot of different comparisons to show you today, as you can see in these two screens right now. But we're going to jump right to the beginning. And as you can tell during the selection screen, there was only 2 characters you could pick in the Sega Genesis version, as the SNES one had all 4, just like in the arcade. But we're going to start off this comparison right. We're going to go right to the controls. Both versions played extremely well. They are very precise. I didn't die that often, and if it was due to my mistake and not because of the poor controls. They were spot on. I was very impressed with both of them. The only difference between the two is the Super Nintendo one had 3 individual buttons to do everything just like in the arcade. There was a jump, shoot, and slide button. The Sega Genesis version was different, however. The B button was to jump and the C was to shoot, or vice versa. But instead of a slide button, as you're pressing the A button, you can just stay in one direction, or you won't be able to move, and you can shoot in any direction you want, which is pretty cool for certain boss fights, but it was something I didn't use that often. And to slide, you'd have to hold down and forward in the angle you want to go at, and press the jump button, which made it kind of difficult in certain areas, because if there was like a hill or some object in the way, it made it really tough to dodge some bullets, and that got me a little upset, but it wasn't like overall extremely game breaking. This still was something of my concern while I was playing. Now let's get some main differences about the graphics. As you can tell, they're pretty close to the arcade, but the Genesis version had a little more contrast to everything and showed a little bit more detail. But on the other hand, it was kind of bland in a lot of areas. It was very dull in the colors. As you can see, there was a lot of green. There wasn't a lot of variety in the bulls and stuff like that, which wasn't too bad, but it was still kind of ugly. But the nice thing about the Genesis version, it had a lot of parallax scrolling in the background, and a lot of moving objects in the foreground and the background as well, that made the game come to life, and that was a little bit true to the arcade. Now the Super Nintendo version had all the colors. It was missing some details on certain things, as you can tell in the train stage here, but every level was almost identical to what the arcade version had, which was great. Now, there was a big issue between the 2 ports that I really noticed, and that was a lot of stuff missing from the Sega Genesis version. Not only did it not include the additional 4 levels in the arcade, but it actually had its own original level made for it, and that was the last one. It was kind of similar to the arcade and SNES port, but that was only for little aesthetic things. Now, the Genesis version has level 1, 4, 5, and its last level is completely original. And they moved all the bosses around, which made it kind of weird. But you know what? It kind of changed the whole experience of the game, which kind of made it fun and fresh. So, was I disappointed that they did this? I was and was not. See, if I only owned a Genesis, I would have been upset. But having both, it's almost kind of like a completely new game, which makes it a little more appealing to me. Now, another huge difference as well, when you're coming up to the mountain stage, you'll notice on the Sega version that there's actual Native Americans trying to attack you, and it coincides with the boss. It makes it really, part of the level. Now, the Super Nintendo version, they removed the Indians, and they only had the regular bad guys again, which was kind of weird. I guess it's something about Nintendo's policy. They didn't, want to tread on eggshells during that, 16-bit war, just like, the Mortal Kombat 1 version, which didn't have blood. They censored a lot of stuff. Now I'm only comparing the 4 levels right now that are in both versions, just so you can see how much different they are. Later on I'm going to show you what additional features both of the games include. Some other stuff that I've noticed as well is some animation changes. In the Sega version, you would get like a flame animation if you got hit, and it'd show like a little guy burned and stuff like that. Super Nintendo version was just a typical death animation if anything else happened, which kind of was disappointing. The SNES version had all the power-ups and the bonus stages, and like the little gold icons for extra points and the health food. The Sega one was completely different. They had these little coins that you'd have to find around, and not only that, if you wanted to hit the bonus stage, you would have to actually collect these star icons, which you can see in the top left, and that would access a completely different bonus stage, which was nothing like the arcade version at all. Now, the music and voice samples were really good. The Super Nintendo version included everything that there was in the arcade. The Sega Genesis version, unfortunately, was missing a ton of voice samples, which kind of sucked. And the music, both versions, were actually really true to it, and they sounded really, really good. I have to give it up to the Super Nintendo version because of the sound chip and all the voice samples. Even though the voice samples were a little, you know, mono-sounding and muffled, it still was included. As you can see, there's some other differences too, like the Sega version included dogs and these walls that you had to bust through on their last original level, which was an alright level. It was nothing exciting. It almost looked like they didn't really try, but it was something different. Both versions did not include the Gatling gun in the last level of the arcade, and in the Super Nintendo version, whenever you went into a saloon, those girls wouldn't kiss you, which was kind of weird, because, you know, every other version had it, and it was just a kiss. I don't know why they would censor that. But oh well, it wasn't a huge thing that would, you know, destroy me in this game, but it was something I kind of missed because it was a funny little animation. Now when you come to the end of both versions, the ending is pretty much the same. I didn't include it because it wasn't a huge difference, but the Super Nintendo version and the Genesis version both had them riding the sun, but the Sega Genesis version was actually a little bit better because it showed that rose fly off just like in the arcade when, you know, the final boss dies, and there's a lot more stuff moving around in the background. The Super Nintendo version was kind of cheesy at the end, which was kind of weird because everything else was pretty much spot on. But once again, you know, it was a 16-bit version, could have been memory constraints, who knows, but overall I think they're both really good games, even though they kind of offer a different experience on both of them, and I don't think you'd be upset with either version you pick, unless you're like a purist, then I would automatically go to the Super Nintendo version. Yes, it's superior in a lot of ways, but like I'm going to explain a little later, the Genesis version does have its perks, and, you know, it does give you a reason to go and pick it up. So, I don't think you'll be upset either way. Now this is the 4 main levels done, and we're going to move on to some other differences like the extra levels and the intros and the bonus sections that you'll see coming up next. Right here we're going to look at the intros between the two different versions. The Super Nintendo one was pretty close to the arcade counterpart. It's missing some detail and a little bit of frames of animation in the background, but the music's spot on. Gives you a good idea of who the characters are, and, you know, a little bit of their personality it displays. Little things like right here, he's not smoking a cigarette, but, you know, that's Nintendo's motto. They don't like to show anything risky in most of their stuff, which, believe me, upset me a couple times. It's a nice intro, the music's really cool, and I'm just going to spoil it for you right now. The Genesis version does not have this whatsoever, and I think that's because it's missing half of the characters in the game. As you can see right here, it just goes right to the intro, scrolls over, shows the two guys riding along. Super Nintendo version had the 4, as you can see in the beginning of the intro. I'm going to show you something else right now. It's the bonus scenes that were in the game. They're completely different. On the left, the Super Nintendo version is exactly like the arcade, except you can't play with 4 players, but, you know, these guys come up, and whoever shot in person would get the points. At the end, you get the most money. Sega Genesis version had a lady throwing stuff out, and there was just bonus icons and free men, which is, you know, it isn't bad as well. They're both pretty cool, but as you can see, they're completely different. Right here is the last part I want to show you, and then you can hear enough of my talking. But on the Super Nintendo version, these are the 4 extra stages that you don't get in the Genesis version. So I threw together a little montage to show you, you know, all the extra characters and, you know, where they're placed properly and what the art stages look like. And on the right is something that the Genesis version had exclusively, and that's a 2-player versus option. Obviously, I didn't have anyone else to play with right now, but as you can see, you can get the gist of it. It's kind of fun. It's really cool. There's different icons you can get, like health and power up, but best out of 2 wins. You guys fight for it. But does it really justify the 4 different levels in the Super Nintendo version? I think not. But you know what? Don't be upset by it. It's still a really good port. It's fun to play, and the exclusive level in it makes it enjoyable as well. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Until next time, rate, subscribe, and comment. See you later.